childhood up, we have had to conform to a certain social game. And so we're in a constant state of competition. Good assistance, secret. You can't make a mistake.
Welcome, everybody, to Friends of Failure. I'm your host, Sam, and this is my co-host, Megan.
Heyo.
Super excited to introduce you to Aryn Van Dyke. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming out and hanging out with us today. I know it's nighttime for you. You're in London, right?
Yes, I'm in London, so it's always like crazy because with my work, I work with a lot of people in the US. I mean, I'm from the US too, so I'm so used to this like adjusted timeline. So people are always like, "Oh my gosh, like sorry to be keeping you so late." I'm like, "Oh no, I sleep in. Like I do all of like my fun stuff in the morning so that at night I can like do a bit more work and overlap as much as possible with the US." So, but yeah, it's evening time for me.
Yeah. How long have you been in London?
I've actually been here for 3 months, and I moved over here from Sweden. So my my partner and I met back in Nashville. It's where I had lived for almost 10 years. And then he started a master's program in southern Sweden. So we moved there at the end of 2019. And so we were there, from essentially pandemic time till about 3 months ago, and then he got a job that brought him over to London, so here we are.
Oh wow,
Living the dream.
Yeah,
got a broad dream.
Like it's so funny because you meet people and you talk to them and they're like, "Oh yeah, I had to move for work," and it's usually like a different state or whatever, but like rarely do I talk to people. Yeah, so I was doing a master's program in Sweden, and then ending up in London. And
I'm just like along for the ride. Like it's all of like his like merit that's bringing him all over here, and I'm just like attaching my cart to the horse and like following him around, just getting to live like the European life. It's great.
Hey,
that's
take
awesome.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and enjoy it, right? I mean, it's such a unique experience. Do you guys think you're going to just stay on that side of the planet, or do you think you'll eventually migrate back, or who knows?
We have really no agenda. It's kind of just wherever the wind takes us. So, I mean, we're not big fans of moving all the time. So we would like to stay here for at least like a solid amount of time that it feels like it was worth moving all of our shit here. So, so we're hoping to stay put at least for a little while, like get a little bit of like, get a little bit grounded here, make friends here before we move off anywhere else. So hopefully we're not moving anytime soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that kind of leads me to, tell us a little bit about yourself, right? Other than traveling, right? So what do you do?
So for kind of my day job, I own a business. So I run a book marketing company. So kind of specializing in kind of consulting with authors and publishers on their book launches. So, and I love books. I've been in publishing now for, like 7 years. So, and I mean, I grew up, reading, loving books. My aunt was in the publishing industry. So I would hear all of her stories. Like she would go to New York with authors, and I just always like loved it and had like stars in my eyes. So when I got the chance to work in publishing too, I was thrilled. And then when we moved, so I was at a publisher back in Nashville. And then when we moved in 2019 to Sweden, I started my own business and got to kind of branch out and work with even more publishers and like independent authors as well. But then in kind of my free time, kind of some of the hobbies that I love to do is I make music as well. So that's kind of just like a fun side projects that I like to work on periodically in between like the work meetings and
everything else,
all that stuff. So and I also have got a little dog, so like I'm a dog mom, love to hang out with her, take her on walks around the parks here. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah,
what kind
awesome.
of music? I was gonna ask what kind of music.
Yeah,
So
same.
I would say kind of like indie pop. So it
Ooh,
kind of
Okay.
just so some is like a bit more like poppy and some is a little bit more like acoustic pop. So it kind of just depends on the project, but it's always in a similar vein.
I
Do
like it.
you
Yeah.
I always anticipate like the craziest thing that I can come up with. Like before, like when we asked you that question, I was like, she's gonna say something like country techno, and I'd be like, what is country techno, right? No, but so whenever you do this, is it strictly for yourself? Like do you ever put it out there? Like, do you have stuff on Spotify or anything like that?
Oh yeah. So I put stuff on Spotify, like Apple Music, kind of all of the big streaming services, but I just do it for myself because
Yeah.
I've like written music since I was 14. And that's like think that's when I got my first guitar, and I just taught myself how to play guitar to like Taylor Swift, and
Yeah.
just started like writing music, and then I think it was like 2015 or so, or might have been like 2016. I was like, you know what, it would actually just be fun to actually like, instead of just recording, a really terrible version myself on GarageBand and putting it on SoundCloud, it would be fun to actually like hire a producer and make something that I've always like heard in my head. And so I did that, several years ago, and it was just so much fun to actually like bring the songs to life, in ways that like I could just not do on my own.
Right.
And so I just kept doing it. So it's kind of just one of those things that I do it because I love it, and I think probably like my family, like my friends listen to it. It doesn't really get like too far beyond that, but it's fun. But I do have stuff on Spotify.
Yeah. It's rewarding in its own way. It doesn't have to
Yeah,
monetize or do anything like that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's kind of cool because obviously you saw the value in getting someone to kind of help you produce some stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
that's essentially you kind of help people as authors do that, right? Where yes, you're doing the
Yes.
marketing aspect, but you also kind of help them, you know, at least point them in the right direction of creating it in the right format so that it can be marketed and actually put out there, right? Um,
Yeah.
do I'm sure there's a lot of producers out there that a person comes up and they're like, hey, I need you to produce this music. They're like, awesome, man. I'm like $100 an hour. Meet me at the studio. And
Yeah.
then, the person gets into the booth or whatever it's called. And then, the producer's got to be like, oh, wow. Like, whether it's like rap music, rock music, pop music, or whatever, where they're
Yeah.
like, you know, what are they going to do with this after we produce it? Right.
Yeah.
Have, so like whenever you're in the realm of marketing someone's writing, right? And
Mhm.
and that could be fiction, nonfiction, like
Yeah.
poetry, I'm assuming. Do you have to, I'm sure maybe it's not often, and maybe it is often, but do you have to kind of paint a picture for people of like, hey, look, I appreciate what you created here, and like I get why you created it, but like this is not going to market well because of whatever reason, right? Do you have that happen to you?
Yeah, it does. I would say it does happen, and I think what's kind of helpful is that there's people who are on the like editorial side who specialize in actually going through these early manuscripts, and offering some more of like that structural editing feedback. So
Mhm.
usually if I'm talking with someone who's just in the really early stages, I'll like refer them out to some more of these like structural editors, because that can just really help shape a book into being something that is just kind of written as a passion project, and actually turning it into more of a like professional, more of like a, I guess the types of books that people read and they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually doing something for me, or like change, like kind of changing the way I'm thinking about XYZ, or oh wow, like this plot is actually really pulling me in, because it's kind of like getting that professional feedback is I think really important to turn a book from just being mediocre into being something that's could actually be successful, and something that people like really truly love and want to recommend to people.
Do you
Yeah.
It makes me curious. Do you get resistance on that? Just because some people are very protective over like
This is
their
it. I'm
project. Yeah.
publishing it. Just like, well, there's a lot of misspelling here. I don't care. It's a part of the
Yeah.
experience. Like,
Yeah, I mean, with some people, there is always like the pushback, and you get that with like, I think especially with memoirs sometimes is that's always the big one where, someone's just kind of written a more of like a diary, and it's great because they just want to share kind of their story. So and that's always great too, but when you do that, it really limits the audience that you're going to be able to reach. It's just like, so, and I actually saw this on LinkedIn. Someone shared this the other day. I thought was like absolutely brilliant is that, people confuse memoirs with autobiographies a lot. And so, a memoir is supposed to be a little bit more of like, entertaining and have that story arc to it. So I feel like that's kind of a prime example of where you can get some pushback from authors because they've just written their life story in like chronological order. And I mean, it's probably a super therapeutic process, but if you, in order for that, your story and your message to kind of reach a wider audience, it's got to be kind of edited and structured in a way that, is going to make sense for people who don't know you. And, in order for them to like really get captured into your story, it's got to be structured in a certain way. So that's kind of something where if I can get in early enough on the writing process, that I'll kind of offer that out to people. Otherwise, I mean, sometimes I get a book when it's already like they've already hit publish, it's already out on Amazon, and they're kind of coming to me asking for help. So in those cases, it gets a little bit more tricky because it would really require doing a second edition.
right.
Yeah.
I looked into it, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Maybe it was like a decade ago. Nah, it was a couple of years ago. I looked into the whole self-publishing aspect of like you can put your book on Amazon and all that jazz, but they always tell you that that there's nothing there that would stop you from just taking something that you wrote and throwing it out there.
Right.
However, like if you take yourself seriously as a writer, they say that or some of the things that I heard people talk about was you really want to have an editor look at what you've written, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they might tear you apart, but it will be a growing experience. Like it will make you a better writer if you can receive it. And even in the regard of, if you just throw something on Amazon, maybe somebody will find it, but you do have to have kind of a mentality that if you want it to reach people, you have to be able to reach the right people.
Exactly.
So like I thought about like it feels like a really small group of people, but they just write a collection of whether it's like short stories, poetry, whatever. I feel like very rarely does that ever end up being like, a bestseller for the New York Times or whatever, right? Because it's such a specific style.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm sure you get to meet a lot of interesting people and learn a lot of interesting stories.
Oh yeah.
So one thing I'm curious about, you're basically you're your own boss. You run your company, right?
Yes.
Do you have any employees or anything like that, or is it just you?
I have a few people who I like have as frequent contractors. So I mean, they work with me. I mean, on a like very regular basis. And so I have one girl who like she's essentially full time, contract for me. I'd love to eventually get, hire actual employees. So that's kind of the trajectory I'm going for. But right now I've got a few like trusty contractors that I love.
Right on. At least you didn't say like I have a handful of interns that if they're lucky, I feed them.
Yeah.
I always feel bad like for the whole concept of interns. But so the reason I brought that up was like there had to be some growth that you experienced whenever you decided like, hey, all right, I'm going to be the founder and CEO of my own company, right? Have there been any like tribulations that have really stuck out and kind of helped you develop as a person in this realm?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was first moving over to Sweden, I was like, okay, I'm just going to freelance for a little bit. So I had been at a publisher, and I was like, okay, I'll just do some freelance marketing. I'll just find a job over there and just go back into the corporate world. And it was really tough because I didn't speak Swedish, and that was pretty much like a requirement at almost every single, company, which makes a lot of sense. So then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna, try and keep with the freelance gig. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna be like a marketing agency. Surely, that's just gonna open up all of these doors for me, and I'll find all these clients in all these different industries. And it was like crickets, and it was so tough to like find clients. And so I would have like a couple referrals, but I was just like, oh my gosh, like how can anyone do this? Like, I don't know if this is for me. And then I was talking with my boyfriend's brother-in-law is an awesome leadership coach and business coach. So I was talking with him, and he's like, well, why don't you books? Like, why don't you just like keep working with like books? And I was like, well, but that's just too specific. Like, I'm trying to like have a bigger, customer
like
pool
branch
here.
out. Yeah.
And he's like, I think you should niche down into books. And I was like, I don't think so, but I'll give it a try. And so once I started just like kind of then pivoting to just doing marketing for like books and publishers and authors, it's like the floodgates just opened up, and I was like, oh, okay. So niching and like kind of going a specific direction was really kind of what changed the game for me. And just really like, I mean, as a business owner, I was like, okay, like that's, finding my audience was really important, because I had cast way too wide of a net the first time around. And I was just like dragging my feet, like, how in the world am I ever supposed to like run a successful business? And then, I went back to what I knew, and it really opened up a lot of doors. And I mean, I'm still like, I was saying this the other day. I feel like I can be very perfectionist sometimes, and I'm like, I want it to be like perfect the first time I do something. But I feel like I am on like my 100th like revision of my like business model, like since I've started, which for me, I'm just like, it's one of those, like, I can't like control or, try and make anything perfect anymore. Cause, it's just every day I'm learning something new, or something I do or like don't want to do with my business, and just, continuing to move forward in brand new ways. So it's been fun, but a huge learning curve. But I would say, like, especially like the biggest change was when I finally said, all right, I'm going to go for this specific audience and see what happens. And it just really like changed everything for me.
Honing in definitely helps, in so many different aspects of life. Right. And I love that you brought up, the mindset of being a perfectionist, right?
Yeah.
One, I think there are people that have that, and they're not aware of it, right? Like they're always like frustrated, or it holds them back. And I'm speaking, I guess, from like my own experience, where I never thought of myself as a perfectionist. And then people pointed out some things, and there's like those tests out there, right? And they tell you like who you are and how, right? Well, I was like, perfectionist. But then when I really became aware of that and thought about it, I would realize that was a problem that it like kind of crippled me a little bit, because, as a personal trainer, you would talk to people just about like, hey, this is how I can help you. But then you wouldn't want to talk to anyone, because you were like, hey, I need to know the conversation in my head, so that when I go into it, it's perfect. And it's like, that's not how conversation works.
Yeah, you got to be flexible.
Like you literally just have to accept the fact that we as human beings are very capable of adapting, and we all do it in our own way. But yeah, like I've done the same thing with different ventures in my life, where I'm trying to think like biggest picture possible, and it's like, hey, you've got to create the teeny tiny little beginning movements that develop the foundation, right? Because I mean,
you kind of need both. Like, you do need some general like big picture, but it can cripple you. Like in your example, it was too big of a net. You couldn't find the right network or community. And when you narrowed down, it was good. But then you still probably have like a 10,000 feet level where you know more about marketing and you can branch out on projects and stuff. But it built your community by going, hey, I got to go down to this little level first. And
Right.
that's when you realize too how small the world is, because you're just in this same little group of people over and over, and then they, reference you or you reference them, and it creates this whole web. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure you went through that a lot. Yeah.
Like it cracks me up, especially with people who are developing a business, one of the things that they have to figure out is, well, how do I even create a business plan that is like for me, right? Because, a lot of corporations like force a business plan upon you, right? And so, especially, we have to make money so that we can live a version of the life that we want to, right? Like money can help create
it is required.
Freedom. Like money can help you kind of create a little bit of freedom of time, right? And so, you'll have these people who are like, all right, I'm going to be a marketer and I want to make $10 million a year. And it's like, okay, cool. Like we can get to that point, but now we need to just start like the beginning pieces. And I remember someone telling me one time, they were having the conversation with me of like, how do you develop a business plan? And they were like, hey, if your goal is to make $1 million a year, great. But if tomorrow you woke up and you were doing the things that it requires to make $1 million, in 12 months over and over again, you'd be completely and utterly overwhelmed because you'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I learned to be like grateful for the fact that, hey, it's okay to, start small, right?
Gradual,
and just
like little
and like
steps. Yeah.
enjoy the process of growing it, right? Because I think you definitely are in a place, you can basically work from wherever you want, right? As long as you have internet.
Yeah, as long as I've got my computer, it's pretty much like ready to rock and roll. But it's and it's true too, because I'll tell this, like, even to my clients, is I like the thought, like in the concept of overnight success is such a myth, because you just see it's like one day someone's famous, and what you don't really see are like the years that they put into their craft, like whatever it is. And that's something like that I'll tell my authors, because it's like you'll get people who they're putting out their first book and they're like, I'm ready to be a New York Times bestseller, and like, while that it does happen kind of once in a blue moon, it takes a lot of these authors like years and years and years of just like growing their network, like kind of growing their platform, just gaining credibility in their field, and before that type of kind of recognition happens. And it's like the same in business too. I've got to put in the work over time, and hope that it really keeps turning into something that's successful. I'll learn things along the way, but it really is kind of that slow and steady, and just really putting in the work and putting in the time to really feel like you're growing and building something that matters.
Yeah. And we talk about something called the 5-year plan, like a lot. That'll come up. Or is it going to matter in 5 years is another way to put it.
Yeah.
And you have to break it up on the negative side of, no, this is not going to matter in 5 years, so I need to move on. Or like you said, building daily habits to a bigger goal, a bigger thing, and it seems more achievable. And even if it's a stressful day, being like, I just got to make it through this hour and then go on to my next hour and kind of go that way. Because when you go way too far out, it can be overwhelming, which I'm sure with your own business, the stakes feel really high, and you've definitely probably gotten there before.
Oh yeah, there's like days that like I'll have days that I just get anxious, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? Like I can't believe I'm out here kind of on this limb, and if something goes wrong, I don't have like a company to fall back on, to like or just really anything besides myself, and like I'm my own boss, like I'm responsible for the work that I'm doing ultimately. So like when I like think about that, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a little bit terrifying. But at the end of the day, like I've grown so much in the last few years, like having to like learn all of these skills and kind of be kind of just learn more about like responsibility and all that. All that like business owner stuff has just like really helped me grow.
Yeah, there's a very strong truth, I think, in the reality of the ups and downs that people have to go through in a process like that. So, we hear a lot about it, I think, I guess in movies too, but I'm thinking about the example of music where, like so-and-so made this song and her and her brother did it, at age 16 in their bedroom. Like they came up with it, they recorded it, everything, and then boom, overnight success. And it's like, okay, well, what about all the stuff that led to developing themselves to a point where they could actually record and write music and then get to a point, right? But, when my mindset really started to shift about the truth of everything being that it is about putting in the hours and putting in the effort and putting in the work to develop yourself to be able to get to that point. I can't imagine being, say, 16 years old and all of a sudden the whole world knows who you are. Like I would have died as a 16-year-old. I could not deal with that magnifying lens, right? And some of the books that are out there, they'll talk about how we get in this weird mindset, maybe because of TV and movies and stuff, that our youth is really the most important time of our life. But there is some really cool things that happen when we're young, but it's not until we're in our 30s and our 40s and for some of us even our 50s that we're developed to a point where it's like, wow, I can really utilize my full potential. And so like I almost said I was 33. I just turned 34. and when I was 24, I remember thinking, like, at age 30, that's it. Like, my body's going to start breaking down and like, if I don't have a career locked into place, I'm never going to retire. I hit 30 and I was like, that's all. It was just all a joke. Like, it was this weird joke that everybody was like talking about. And then you get to that point of your life and it's like, there are people that literally had a career. They get to the age of like 43 and they go, I'm not doing this anymore. And they do something like what you're doing, right? They go on a limb, they become their own boss or whatever. And they essentially, start over, but they still have plenty of time to make that a very successful venture, And so I thought that was a good point that you brought up of like, hey, just small dose of reality. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. And you probably don't want it to happen overnight, right? Like that would be super overwhelming. If I woke up tomorrow and like a video I put on the internet went viral and everybody's like bothering me about it, I would be like, oh, like turn off my phone, right?
I know, but it's also like funny too how many authors who we've probably all like heard of, they didn't write their first book until they were 40 something, sometimes 50 something. So it is like it does like go to show that it's not like we have to get everything done, like everything accomplished by a certain age or a certain like time in our life. There's a lot to be said for like the experience and having like the work under our belt, because then it gives you a lot of like more perspective. And then if you do choose to write a book when you're 47, you've just got all of this like experience that you can pull from, whether it's like fiction or nonfiction. And I mean, kind of having that like extra like layer of experience and knowledge to just like throw into like your writing. And so I think I always like try to remind myself of that, is like you can never, it's never too late to just like start something new or try something new. So it's something I love to remember. And I don't think I have a book in me personally, but I always think like, well, but it's all right, because if I'm if I turn 52 and I decide that's when I'm gonna write my book, that's perfectly fine.
That's how it was meant to be. I like how you mentioned it, that we kind of like race to it. We feel like I gotta do this while I'm young, like I need to do this, and we all get trapped in some version of that. And then once you realize, oh, there's not like an expiration date, I can do this whenever, you can kind of take a deep breath and be like, okay, like I'll do it when I'm ready to do it. and I'll, support myself another way until then. And
Yeah. I think we're all very overstimulated with I guess I'll call it knowledge or information, right? Where, Bill Murray, before he became an actor, he was like literally on his way to becoming a doctor. Like I think he either just became a doctor or was about to literally become a doctor and went, nah, I don't want to do this.
Imagine if he was your doctor though. That would have been so cool.
God, that would be
it would have been yeah, it would have been something, right? But so there's this like weird thing where it's like, hey, he did all this work to do something that like I can't even perceive, right? Becoming a doctor, and then went, nah, I'm not doing this, and then became an actor, and like that worked out well for him, I think. But so you have these weird things just being thrown at you all the time of like, well, so and so at the age of 16 became like a multimillionaire TikToker, and like so and so like lived in their car until they were 46 years old, and then had this like epiphany, and then changed their whole life. I always joke about The Rock talking about is like I had $7 in my pocket, and it's inspirational, but I was like, who does that apply to? I don't think that's a lot of us, like, whatever.
Well,
so where it gets weird to me is that we're touching on it over and over again of we have these things that are like stimulating us to believe that we need to hurry up or slow down, or like where's the balance in that. And I struggle with it all the time, but I became aware of, if you're trying to live like a fulfilling life, part of it is being able to be present in the moment. I mean, we have to have goals, and we have to have like an idea of what direction we're going and why we're doing it. Right. That helps a lot. But then also being able to go like, hey, it's okay that I'm not going to write a book or write a song. Like, I think it would be hilarious if one day I see you like on YouTube or something, and you have a music video because like you wrote enough music and people start following, and then you're like, well, I know how to market, and you start marketing yourself as a
and then
musician.
Sam's just in the comments like, told you.
Yeah. I knew this day would come, right? And so I think that's an interesting thing to kind of talk about sometimes, with the right people, where we don't know that we have tomorrow. And so it's not that the future becomes irrelevant. It's that what are you doing today that kind of fulfills you in that same regard of, hey, I want to be a great marketer for people who want to publish their books. And if you at the end of the day can be like, hey man, I did this and that, and that's really going to be beneficial, maybe not tomorrow, but in the long run, it's like, hey, I was putting another piece into the dream.
And there's people out there who, I mean, because I'll ask this to kind of new clients, is kind of what their ultimate goal is for releasing their book. And I would say majority of the answers that I'll get is just that they want their message just to be out there in the world. Like they want their story out there, and they want to like help people through their message. And so when that's the case, like that just makes it a really like rewarding part for me, is just to kind of be someone who can help bring these messages from kind of point A to point B, like being in the hands of these readers. And because like you said, it's we don't necessarily have tomorrow, and it's just being able to put out your work and your message, and to kind of be a part of that is really cool. And just helping change people's lives, whether it's through like a nonfiction message, or even with fiction, and just like allowing people to have that kind of escape from reality, and just having that kind of like time to themselves. I think that's just like a really cool part too, is just getting to help the author like kind of pursue this dream, and just helping them find like even one more reader to to inspire with their story.
And you're kind of like the satellite dish a little bit, like you take in all these stories and then help get them out. And I'm just curious how you help people find their audience, and like what that process is like, because I'm sure they have failed at figuring it out, and that's why they come to you.
Which also leads to the same, like, to piggyback on top of that question, you're the one marketing it. So like, are you take care of all the marketing, or you're showing them how to market their book? Like, are you doing all the social media and all the reaching out to the companies? I that's just like a second part of that question that she just asked.
Yeah, so I would say both. It kind of depends on kind of what capacity, you know, an author or publisher wants to work in. So sometimes it is me kind of just going through more of like, you know, showing them, here's like the types of things that you should be doing. And, you know, I'll give them like training videos for how to like go do it themselves. Because there's people out there who are like, I just need to know, you know, the steps. Like, I just need to know, you know, 1, 2, 3, what I need to do. And I'm ready to dive in and actually do it myself. So for, you know, authors like that, it's just kind of giving them like the guidebook and the roadmap and kind of teaching them how to do it. But then there's some people who are like, I don't have the time to do it. I don't really have the like interest in doing it. So I would like you to do it for me. So I would kind of do like both pieces of it. But in terms of finding the audience, because that's like, again, it kind of ties back to like when I was talking about, you know, how I was trying to cast like a super wide net for my own business. Like, I think that's like one of the biggest mistakes a lot of authors make, who are, they're just like, yeah, my book is like, I think anyone could get something out of it. And I'm like, like facepalm, like, no, that's really not like, that's really like one of the most untrue things you could say about a book. Because if you try to sell your book to everyone, you're probably going to sell it to no one. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like walk through this like messaging exercise with authors, like particularly in the nonfiction space, and just really help them clarify like who exactly they're writing the book about, like what their book, you know, is covering, and kind of like the different topics. And like in the book world, like we'll kind of call these felt needs, you know, of the reader. So like what are maybe some of the situations that your target readers going through, that this book will help, you know, help them get from point A to point B, or like what lessons are they going to learn in this book that's going to get them to a certain point. So when we go through that exercise, it really opens like a lot of doors to say like, oh, okay, I didn't really like realize this at first, but you know, I am trying to help this like super specific person. So then, you know, we can like walk out of that, you know, session and that exercise and say, okay, as you're posting on social media, you just like really focus on, you know, these like few like felt needs, and make sure that these people know like your book is exactly what they're looking for. Because if you're just saying like, oh, my book is available, you know, everyone go buy it here, you're not really going to get anyone who's that interested. But like, if you're saying like, oh, you know, are you like feeling XYZ? Like, I've been there. I know how that feels. Like, you know, this book will, you know, teach you, you know, how to, you know, get to this point through these 3 steps, or kind of whatever it is. So it can really help open like some doors to say like, okay, wow, I guess I really need to focus on, you know, reaching, you know, divorced moms, or, you know, I really need to like focus on this, like, you know, CEO, you know, or, you know, there's just like so many different, you know, aspects.
It's like a subcategory to a subcategory kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. So in it, of course, like there's going to end up being, and I'll kind of use the analogy too of like a, you know, a target or a dartboard. You know, you're the first people you should ever really be like marketing your book to is that like bullseye piece. And, you know, of course you're going to like expand out a little bit. You know, there's going to be people who maybe will not fit, you know, every checkbox that will enjoy it. Like, you're going to get other people too, but the target, you know, even at its like fullest capacity, will never be everybody. And I just like try and remind authors of that. But once you can kind of narrow down like, okay, here's just some of like the feelings that I know, you know, my audience has, like, you can also like just even think of some more like general like demographics and think like, okay, are these people more on Instagram? Is this a LinkedIn crowd? Like, is this a TikTok crowd? Or is this mainly like a blog or email crowd? And that can just really help like then narrow down. So, you know, an author doesn't have to be on every single platform. And like, that's usually actually like probably worse than anything else, is just like, is being on all of them, because it's usually just like a waste of energy and a waste of time. So it just kind of can help them focus. Okay, you know, like LinkedIn is going to be, you know, the space for you. Just like really focus there on, you know, being consistent with content creation, you know, engaging with, you know, other people on the platform. So that's kind of the direction that I'll try and take authors, is saying, okay, here's the felt needs, like, here's how you can be communicating with them online. So like they know that your book is for them specifically. And then also, you know, based on what we know about your target reader, focus on, you know, these platforms, and just make sure you're like staying consistent there, and actually, you know, using the algorithms to connect with people. Because I mean, that's a part of it too. You know, you can't just like post and ghost and think that people are gonna, you know,
and hope that the whole world is like, yay, finally the book.
I like that. I hadn't heard that before, the post and ghost. Also, if and when I write my book, if I get asked that question, whether it's by you or whoever, and they go, who's the audience? I'll be like, the planet. And they're gonna be like, all right, well,
didn't
another
learn
lost
anything.
cause, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The entire universe.
Yeah. And even like I've had authors be like, I really think like any woman would appreciate this book. And I'm like, well, I'm a woman, and I wouldn't read this if I, you know, saw it on a shelf. Like, so there's definitely ways to like just keep like funneling it down. And again, like, you think you might be really limiting your audience, but the more you niche that audience, and like the more targeted you can get, like the more doors will actually open for you. You know, because, you know, let's say there's a room of, you know, 20 people, you know, who's your exact audience, you know, in let's say like you walk into a party, 20 of those people are going to be the exact people you want to read the book. But then if you're marketing the book to the whole party, probably not that many people are going to get it, you know, so you might sell like 4 books, but if you market it specifically to those, you know, 20 people, then you'll probably end up getting, you know, 20 people buying your book. So that's like kind of like another analogy I like to like share with people is, you know, you can either try for the whole party and not get that many, or just say, you know, I want to talk specifically to you, and you. And I'm going to, you know, show you exactly how my book is going to help you, and you're going to want to buy my book. So it's
I keep picturing, you know, it's all about being focused on the precision of the marketing, right? Because if you're just hit firing a shotgun, you're going to hit something, but like, you don't know what you're going to hit, right?
Exactly.
One thing that kind of just popped into my head, I noticed this a really long time ago, but celebrities, you know, you'll see them as like a talk show host, or they're doing movies or a TV show, and then one day it's like, by the way, check out my kid's book, blah blah blah, and like you can buy it, whatever. And I feel that would be a really easy thing for an author or someone who's trying to become a published author to kind of realize that a lot of these people, what they do is they write a kid's book, and maybe it's because they have kids their own and they're like, hey, I wanted to make something for my kids. But, you know, I kind of had that light bulb turn on, right? Where, hey, this is for little kids from, you know, the age 1 to 3 that their parents can read to them, or like 1 to 5. I mean, that is a very precise market of like, this is who we're writing for, right? That's got to be a little bit easier. And I'm sure it's harder than I think, right? Because like writing a book for kids probably isn't as easy as it sounds. But, you know, whenever you're trying to compete and write as an author in the realm of, you know, Game of Thrones or Harry Potter, or like, God, if somebody's like, I want a wizard book, they're not going to go looking for Sam's, you know, first ever written book of, you know, wizard fantasy. They're going to go for something that,
if you market it right, maybe they will.
If you thought you liked Harry Potter, wait till you read my book, okay? And just like make up some lie of like the author of Harry Potter was my mentor, and
I imagine it's just a knockoff where like names are slightly changed.
Right, it's literally the
Rumble
same
roar.
exact story. She would sue me, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
But that's got to be kind of fun to navigate, and also a little strange to navigate, right? Having those conversations with people where it's like, I think every woman should read this book, and you're like, well, people, I don't know either, like how many people are consuming books on a regular basis versus how many people are really writing books and then getting them published. Like I feel like it's just like music, right? There's so many options out there that I use Amazon Music, and I'll go to this thing every week. They're like, hey, here's some things that we think you might like just based on what you've been listening to. And like if I have a week where I'm listening to a lot of rap music, it'll try to show me like rap music I haven't listened to. And I mean, it'll be like way off because they're just like, I don't know, it's in the same genre. Like maybe you like these. And so, I mean, that's a reality of it too, right? Is that there's just so many options out there to read.
Yeah.
If you're like sitting down physically reading a book, like I don't know how many books you can get through in a month.
You'd be surprised.
I think it just depends. Yes, there's some like readers who will get through something in like a few hours.
Yeah.
So really, it really depends. And I think right now, like there's so many options even in terms of self-publishing. So, and that's because I would say like before, it's like a handful of years ago, it really was like, you would either get a publisher or you just wouldn't put your book out there. And I feel like in the last, several years, people have really started turning more to the self-publishing route. And because I think too, people have started to learn like, oh, there's actually resources out there that can make this, that can still make my book, like professional, like look professional and sound professional. Whereas I think before it was just like maybe like the concept that, well, if I want it to, have a good cover, if I want it to be edited, it's going to have to be with like a major publisher. And now there's, the whole, freelance economy is like starting to boom. And there's, people coming from like major publishers that are now working freelance, specifically for these independent authors. So there's so many like resources now to actually get your book published, and even and especially like do it the right way too, because I mean it's like you said, like if you wanted to write a wizard fantasy book, if you have a book cover that looks like it should be a wizard fantasy book, your odds of someone buying it have shot up, but there's people out there who are like, well, I'm going to write a wizard fantasy book, and the cover looks, nothing like its genre. And, that's where it's like, you're not going to probably get as many people going over to your book page and buying the book because it just doesn't look like it should be there. So that's another part of marketing that's, judging a book by the cover.
I was about to say
is absolutely
it's a saying because it's a thing.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that if I was like, hey, I made this wizard book and I was just like, I want it to be all black, and they're like, okay, well, what color do you want the font? No font, just straight up, just a black book. And they're like, people are gonna think this is like a blank journal, and be like, no, they'll get it. I think it's one thing I just wanted to point out. I do think you're right. There is this whole shift in things where if they can, like if people want a personal trainer, it's not that they won't go to the corporate gyms, but if they can find someone that they can align with, and they're running their own business. Yeah. The people are doing it obviously to make a living, but they're doing it because they're about it. Right. Yeah. Where, I've talked to people where they talk about their personal trainer from, whatever corporate gym, and they're like, they did an okay job, but they're really just trying to make the paycheck. And then they also have that corporation being like, hey, who cares about the person? You need to be making us money so that, whatever. And I think that's where a lot more conversations start coming up about supporting smaller businesses and supporting freelancing and stuff, is that you're supporting people that are about it and genuinely want to help. Right. Yeah. So I think that's really awesome that you're in that world. Right. So I did want to ask you a question before we have to wrap up, right? And
Yeah.
it's what I like to ask people, at the end of our conversation is, do you have any advice for people listening, or do you have anything that you think the people that are listening should ponder on that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, for anyone who who thinks that they might write a book at some point, I guess my advice would be, I mean, start growing up, like a network, a community, that's either in like the space you want to write about, and just kind of start, growing that like interest and kind of growing an audience, even if it feels like you're a few years away. Like that can kind of be sometimes like the big difference in, when you're releasing your book, if you've already been growing kind of the audience that's, going to read it. But then I would also just say, like, again, don't be afraid to, like really like niche down and find like the people who are, actually going to, read the book and write the book for them, like market the book to them. And I think that really like can spread across industries as well. Cause like that's even advice that I need to take for myself is like, what services do authors need and like do they want? And then, I need to make sure that as I'm, marketing myself, and marketing my business, that it's speaking to those, directly to the people that I, want to be helping. So I think it really can kind of cross industries, is just knowing exactly, who you're trying to, who you're trying to help, who you're trying to, benefit, and just making sure that you're connecting with them in the ways that they want to like connect with you.
I like that. I joke about it and I get why they do what they do, but like superhero movies, they make them so that anybody that watches it can be like, I like that part. So whether it's action, comedy, sad, romance, like they literally put it all in there. And growing up, I always really loved movies, but I will tell you, now that I'm older and when I try to watch something, I really want it to be just like what you're talking about. Like I want it to be honed in on
a specific, yeah.
I don't want to watch a movie that's been created to hit every person on the planet so they can make every possible dollar from it. I want something where exactly what you said. The person obviously made the movie and they were like, there's a very certain group of people that are
Yeah.
gonna like this.
Yeah.
And I hope they do, right?
Yeah.
Because that's got to be really hard as an artist in any format of no longer making it for yourself and a certain group of people that you want to help or resonate with, and just trying to like, how do I make the most generic thing so I can just say my audience is the planet, right? So that's super awesome. I think there's a lot of people that will benefit from that advice.
Another dimension to it is like job applications. You mentioned LinkedIn before, and it kind of made me think, when you do want a certain job, you do have to hone into that audience, change your resume for that position, the whole 9 yards, change your bio. So this really can be applied to anything. It is a good rule of thumb to start with that little bullseye and then work your way out. Yeah.
And then question for each of you: what's like your favorite genre of book to read?
Oof. I like fantasy, like definitely wizard stuff. So like Sam already kind of blew that one for me.
Well, so if I'm honest, I think whenever I read, I didn't grow up reading for enjoyment. Like I always had to read because it was like, hey, you have a book report to do, right? And I didn't enjoy, I'm a very fidgety, active person, so I didn't enjoy sitting down and reading. I was always really curious about the stories and stuff, but when I really started to ingest more books was whenever I realized that if I'm gonna read something, which now I listen to it, right, like on Audible, if I'm gonna take in a book, it's because I want to get something from it. So for me, I think as of late, it's a lot about very intelligent people who are talking about the mind and like neuroscience and talking about mental development, whether it's like consciously or, expanding the mind, right? But they're able to break it down to where I can understand this really, really smart shit that like I'm not going to go to school for. That's the stuff that I really enjoy, because one, I'm like, hey, I learned something that I can apply. But two, I feel a little bit smarter. Like, I'm like, okay, I kind of get it a little bit better, right? Yeah. Which I'm sure I'm a part of that audience, right? Where they're like, they want the guy that's not a scholar who really wants to learn some smart stuff, and then let's break it down Barney style for him, right?
Oh my, Barney style.
Yeah. That was a good question. I appreciate that. So we have to segue into Megan's corner, but I will say, Megan, whenever you brought up the resume thing, I do remember that moment where a person had to explain to me. I was like in my early, I guess mid 20s, where they're like, yo, dude, if you're gonna apply to like several different types of jobs, right? Like if you're like, hey, I'm gonna work in marketing, then you can probably tailor your resume and like hone in a little bit for that company. But then what happened to me is I was like, well, I want to like shoot my shot this way, that way, whatever. And they're like, well, you need to make like 4 different resumes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? And they're like, yeah, dude, this isn't just like a brief history of jobs that you've had. Like, you need to show your value. And I think that's a great point. Like, I love it. You got to hone in, and you have to be mindful of who you're trying to talk to. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
With that being said, Megan, who are we trying to talk to today?
Oh no, now we have to reveal that what our audience is. Just, young people, middle-aged people trying to figure stuff out. That's way too broad.
Anybody living on planet Earth.
I knew he was going to go way up there. Today, we're just trying to reach you guys on our socials. You can find us everywhere, which we have learned is probably not the best method, at Friends of Failure. And then you can email us your stories at friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com. Those can be short stories, long stories, sad, funny, whatever. You can make them totally anonymous. Just nothing illegal, nothing sketchy. And
no
we
murder
will
confessions.
None of that. We will not hold that. And we will read them out at a later date.
Yeah. And hey, I guess Megan does have a good point, right? Of hopefully in the near future, it's just going to be like, welcome to Megan's Corner. Find us on Instagram. And then that's it. Like, or like, we're just like, find us on Gmail. Find you on Gmail. What does that even mean?
Is there a search bar? Yeah.
Yeah. How am I supposed to like and comment on Gmail? And it'd be like, just, send us your resume at, friendsoffailurepodcast@gmail.com.
We'll go with that.
Super enjoyed having you here today. I appreciate you making some time for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely will be thinking about books and marketing probably for the next couple of days, of like some of the books that I've been reading, and like, was I marketed to? But I think we're all painfully aware that we're all being marketed in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah.
But it also allows us to find the things that we genuinely want to resonate with. So keep fighting the good fight. I know you're probably helping a lot of people with what you do. With that being said, I like to close out with our final thought. Super simple, but I think it's very true. And that's, life is happening for you, not to you. So just go out there and do something.
Love it.
If it's not I'm stronger than you, it's I'm wiser than you, I'm more loving than you, I'm more tolerant than you, I'm more sophisticated than you. It doesn't matter what it is, but this constant competition is going on. This is the secret. This is the secret. You can't make a mistake.